Hi there, my name is Jeff Gomez. I'm the host of the Self-Inflicted Oral Nostalgia Guided by Voices fan podcast. I'm also the author of Zeppelin over Dayton, Guided by Voices album by album, which you can buy wherever books are sold. Now, in the book, I talk about what's my favorite GBV record and what's my least favorite, but I don't really do any ranking of the records in between those two extremes. So I thought it'd be fun to do a video where I look at all 30 Guided by Voices studio records and rank them from worst to best. And so that's what we'll be doing today. Of course, this is my own subjective opinion. Yours will differ, and that is okay. Leave in the comments your own ranking, your own favorites, and your own least favorites. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. This is Guided by Voices, worst to best. All right, we're going to kick things off with album number 30, and while something obviously does have to be at the bottom of the list, I do think this is the band's worst record. This is English Little League from 2013. This was their fourth reunion album. They'd made 3 in 1 year, then they made this the following year. And, I just think they were really rushing it at this point, and it's just not a very good record. There aren't a whole lot of standout songs. Probably the best song on the record is Islands, which is actually a Tobin Sprout song. The funny thing about this record, too, is this was around the time that Pollard supposedly got his own home studio and recorded a bunch of it there. But the results were again, pretty poor and sounded pretty bad, even for GBV standards. Coming in at number 29, we have Please Be Honest. This was kind of the surprise return of GBV after he had shit-canned the name back in 2014 on the Cool Planet Tour. This came out in 2016. Very kind of strange record in that Pollard plays all the instruments. And again, it's a weird kind of lo-fi record. He thought at one point he would call this teenage guitar, but if it turned out, to be better than he thought, he would call it GBV. And it's certainly a step up from a teenage guitar record, but it doesn't really quite rise to the height of being a GBV record, let's say. Probably the most important thing about this record, though, is that the band toured behind this, or actually Pollard got a new band together to tour behind this record, which sort of led to the new classic lineup phase that they're in now. There's some good songs, My Zodiac Companion, Kid on a Ladder, but I think that these songs really came alive during the subsequent tour where they sounded amazing. But, too many of these songs are weak songs. The Grasshopper Eaters, I think that's the one that has that just super annoying sound going on in the background for almost the entirety of the song. And so, not a great record, but was momentous in the history of the band because it basically got the band back together and the band back on the road. Very similar to the last record, this comes in at number 28 on my list. This is Let's Go Eat the Factory from 2012. Again, the surprise return of the band after Pollard had broken up the band in 2004 after Half Smiles They Decomposed. Got the so-called classic lineup back together and started, first of all, did a show in 2010 for the Matador 21 showcase in Vegas, and then decided to keep the band together after doing a tour and start making records again. I love the 2 records that came after this, but I just don't think that this is a very good record, although it does have some standout songs. The first singles that they put out after being away for a long time, The Unsinkable Fats Domino and Donut for a Snowman, were just fantastic songs. Really a lot of fun, but I think as a record, this does not really hold up. And my dislike for this album actually, begins with the cover. I think this is like the worst GBV sleeve that Bob ever created. The back's not too bad. But I like this little bit on the inside with the kid on the bugle. But again, like Please Be Honest, not a great record, but led to some really great records down the line with getting the band back together. Coming in at number 27, this was a Self-Inflicted Aerial Nostalgia, 1989. One of the sort of the first couple of self-released records. I think this was number 3. Not a horrible record, but they were still kind of finding their sound. Paper Girl is a great song. Navigating Flood Regions is a great song. So certainly some good tracks, but they were still kind of finding the sound that they would perfect later on in their career, obviously. Coming in at number 26 for me is Sandbox. This is 1987. This is their shortest record. It's not even a half hour. It's like 27 minutes, 12 songs. Pollard had talked about this being his bid for power pop stardom and wanted this to look like, a slick record. So this, a cover taken on the front, which he, later called cheesy. But it looks, again, this is, one of the self-released records, and it looks really nice. The back of that looks totally cool. It's actually a nice cover. Some decent songs on here, but not kind of a classic, not really a great listen the way that some of the other later pre-scat LPs are. So for me, this comes in at number 26 on the list. Coming in number 25, we have Cool Planet. This was the final record for, actually, you know what, the so-called classic lineup. It kind of, certainly not disbanded, but Kevin Fennell was out of the picture, and they got back Kevin March, who had drummed with the band during the second phase of the Matador year. So, you couldn't really call this that so-called classic lineup anymore, and the idea of GBV being a reunited thing was starting to run out of steam at this time, which is why, again, about halfway through this tour, Bob just called it quits and not only canceled the tour, but really kind of canceled the band yet again. A pretty good record. Again, it's got some really strong Tobin Sprout songs on it. All American Boy, Authoritarian Zoo is a really nice song. Table at Fool's Tooth. But doesn't, and Cool Planet, the final song, is really good. So not a terrible record, but of that phase of the reunion, this is my least favorite of those reunion records. Coming in at number 24, we've got the band's first album, not the first thing they released. The first thing they released was their Forever Since Breakfast EP, and this was their first full-length record in 1987, Devil Between My Toes, 14 songs, clocking in at just about 31 minutes. Probably what's really interesting about this is that there's a number of instrumentals on the record, these sort of post-punk, Joy Division, Wire-esque kind of things that really would never reappear later on in the band's discography. It's funny, the back is sort of printed upside down here on the box set. Some decent songs on here, Discussing Wallace Chambers, Hank's Little Fingers, I think that's a great song, Hey Hey Spaceman, Captain's Dead. So not at all a bad listen, but if you're a fan of what later became to be known as the GBV sound, this would not fit in with that expectation, and so it's not really a record I reach for, and certainly not from these early years, because there's a couple of the other self-released records that I like more than this. Coming in at number 23, one of the band's more recent records. This is Surrender Your Poppy Field from 2020. So my least favorite of the new classic lineup, not a bad record, but of the ones that they've released recently, this is my least favorite. The cover's pretty nice, although it's got that sort of that font that's been on a couple of records that's not really my favorite. You're the Hard Hitters, nice song. Volcano, I think, is an amazing song. So some good tracks. But again, compared to some of the other records like Mirrored Aztec and Sweating the Plague, it's my least favorite of the new classic lineup, and that's why it comes in at number 23. Coming in number 22 on the list is Motivational Jumpsuit. So this is then the final record of the so-called classic lineup getting reunited in the early 2010s. This came out in 2014. What plagues this record, I think, plagues all of those reunion records, which is it just has too many songs. This has 20 songs. I don't think there was a record from that reunion period that had fewer than like 17 tracks. So they were really just releasing records at a very fast clip, 3 in 1 year. I think this was 2 in 1 year. And putting on a whole lot of songs. If they would have just released, maybe half as many records with each record having 3 or 4 fewer songs, I think that would be much better records. And so this was the final of the one that had the so-called classic guys on it. Kevin Fennell was not there on the next record. Again, it's got some pretty good tracks on it. Vote for Me Dummy was great. Planet Score, I think, was just a really great song and a really fun video. Littlest League Possible, awesome opening track. And so, again, not a bad record, but again, like a lot of the records from this period, just went on, just had too many songs. I can't say it went on too long because it actually clocks in at like 38 minutes, just under 38 minutes. So it's not, a long listen for having 20 tracks, but it just has too many tracks, which I feel are kind of half-baked. Closing out the bottom 10, we have Mag Earwig from 1997. So even though this is only 21 on my list, this is my favorite GBV album sleeve. I think that is such a A beautiful cover. Again, this is 1997, but this in no way looks dated. The 90s had a certain kind of aesthetic, which this record does not suffer from at all. It's got that super classy sans serif font, a really nice understated collage by Bob. You got a little version of the rune there, so a really fantastic sleeve. The back I don't care for all that much. But just a really great looking package. The reason that this is pretty low on my list is because it's a very compromised record, and I think all the records they released in that first Matador phase were compromised in some way, and I'll sort of talk about that as I go through and talk about each one of them. This was a record where Bob had sort of reportedly fired the so-called classic lineup and gotten together with Cobra Verde and basically fronted this pre-existing band and recorded a whole record with them. But then when it came time to release the record, what was released was kind of a hodgepodge of tracks he had done with Cobra Verde, along with some home recorded stuff, as well as stuff he'd actually done with the guys who he'd just gotten rid of. So, this is sort of billed as being a new GBV, and yet the first song, Can't Hear the Revolution, has Tobin Sprout on backing vocals. So, for a record that was really sort of billed as being a new phase for the band, it really sits kind of strangely between what had happened before, and you can't even say what was going to happen because Cobra Verde was gone as his backing band after the tour, except Doug Gillard from Cobra Verde and from previous to that, Death of Samantha, stayed with Bob and has been a collaborator for him for decades at this point and is in the current incarnation of the band. Some great tracks are on here. Jane of the Waking Universe, fantastic song. The Finest Joke is Upon Us, I think is just a really, really great track. Not Behind the Fighter Jet. I'm a Tree, which is a great, great song that actually Doug Gillard had written for a previous band of his called Gem. But some of these are a little bit ham-fisted. Bulldog Skin is probably my least favorite GBV single. And again, at 21 songs, I just think that's just too many songs. I think if they would have gone ahead and released sort of the GB Verde record, where it was, Pollard fronting Cobra Verde, and they had enough songs to make a whole record of that, I think would have been a much stronger record. Okay, now we're going to look at the middle chunk of the records 20 to 11. I'm sure this will be a little bit of a controversial choice, but coming in number 20 for me is Alien Lanes. I get that this is many people's favorite GBV album. In my defense of not really caring for this record very much, let me say, I don't mind short songs. I don't mind songs that are poorly produced. I know that not every track has to be a single and that some songs serve as a bridge between others. But for me, there's just too many songs on here that are half-baked, that really just don't hang together. The construction of this is nowhere near as polished as B1000, where all those little snippets were incorporated into the overall flow of the record. And so for me, this is really a miss for the band. And I think also too, one of the things that makes me not like this record is just what it did for the band at the time and really slowed their momentum. Coming off of B1000, they had so much artistic capital, and so many people wanted to work with them, and hear from them. And then for Bob to insist on releasing this, collection of really poorly recorded tracks, many of which were not all that good, quite frankly, I think really just sort of stopped the band in their tracks and relegated them to being a cult band when they could have been as big as Pixies or Weezer or any of these groups from the 90s who had some big hits and really, got on the radio and got themselves well known. I also have to say, I just don't like this cover. I mean, this brown is just kind of ugly, and then again, the font and the color there, feels very 90s in a way that Mag Earwig did not. And so while, of course, does have some really great tracks, the version of Motor Away that's on this is just amazing. Game of Pricks, Watch Me Jumpstart. For me, a lot of those songs that are, kind of the snippets or the filler songs are just are too throwaway, and they really detract from the overall flow of the record, which is why this comes in pretty low on my list at number 20. 19 is How Do You Spell Heaven? This was the second record from the lineup that Bob had gotten together after the Please Be Honest tour. Actually, once he'd brought in Doug Gillard to replace Nick Mitchell, no relation to Mitch Mitchell. And so this is not at all a bad record, and maybe I need to give it a few more listens to sort of, get a better idea of it or sort of reappraise it. But the reason I think this comes in low on my list is this came so close after August by Cake. which was a record that I love, and you'll see that it comes in very high on my list on the countdown. And it came out so close on the heels of August by Cake that I actually never, almost to this day, haven't really got around to giving this too much of a deep listen, because August by Cake was such a great record, such a big record, a double record, and that I was really still digesting August by Cake by the time that this came around, to the point that then once Space Gun was released, which I think is the record that followed that, I kind of went right from August by Cake to Space Gun. I never really spent a whole lot of time with this record, but it's got some good songs. Steppenwolf Mausoleum's good. Diver Dan. It's got this instrumental, Pearly Gate Smoke Machine, that I don't really care for. Just to Show You is a great track. A really sort of interesting cover with Bob on the cover. I don't think he'd made an appearance on a record cover since probably Sandbox back in '87. So cool cover. Love that they left the lettering off of this. There's no, it doesn't have the name of the band or the record on there at all. So cool sleeve. Again, not a bad record, but coming as it did, sandwiched between two really great records back in 2017. Only comes in at 19 for me. Number 18 on the list is Vampire on Titus from 1993, the record that really kind of broke the band. It was their first record that ever was properly released by Scat Records. Really lo-fi. Bob was working with the fewest amount of collaborators that he really ever would. It was kind of like him and Tobin, mainly on the 4-track, not really playing too much on it, and his brother basically. Bob on drums, and interesting record. It's probably again one of their more lo-fi albums. Has some good songs on it, and it's a kind of a cool cover here. Very lo-fi with like highlighter and kind of a cutout from a book. So not a bad listen, but I do find that the lo-fi quality does sort of keep me at bay a little bit. Although it's got some really great songs: Jar of Cardinals, Marches in Orange, Dusted. So, again, not a bad record, but I do admit that the sound quality on this is a little bit hard for me to take sometimes. So I never quite, got into it the degree that some people have, and that's why it comes in at number 18 on my list. Coming in at number 17, this is the first record by the band the last record, I think, in 2019, 12 songs in 38 minutes. They had not made a 12-song record since, I think the 80s. So Bob really trying to, fight against that instinct of his to just, pile on song after song after song. And I must say, this is a record that I probably will get higher on my list as time goes on. I think when I initially heard it, I discounted it a bit. Some of the prog influence didn't quite sit right with me, because I actually wasn't into prog at the time. And then I was doing the podcast episode on this and was writing about prog and thought, you know what, I actually don't know that I know much about prog. So I read some books, bought some records, ended up loving it. And so when I came to this record after having kind of that education and early Genesis and Yes and stuff, I found listening to this record and being like, holy shit, this is like amazing. Whereas I'd kind of discounted it at first. So I bet over the years this will be a record that I go to more and more. And while it comes in at 17 on the list now, I could see if I were to do this again in another couple of years, it might even crack the top 10, because it is a really good record. Cool cover. It's a Pollard collage, but again, not his sort of usual style. And if you go back to, I think it's EAT 15, I think, you can see the original of this collage, and it actually is very much a rectangle, and there's an image up here. I think it's a guy covered in paint, but that's cut out, so what you really just get is this black and white, which again is a really cool touch, and again, not a typical Pollard cover, and I love the way the song titles are there in the back. Moving on, at number 16, we have Universal Truths and Cycles from 2002. This is the return to Matador after the adventure with TVT, which only lasted for 2 records. Cool cover here. It's got a great sort of textured sleeve. Again, Bob helped design this with an in-house Matador designer, but not a typical looking GBV record, and for that I like it. It's sort of tough, sort of like Mag Earwig. It's kind of a compromised record, kind of a bit of a flawed vision that Pollard was, speaking of Sweating the Plague, which only had 12 songs. That was the plan for this record, just to sort of deliver a really lean 12-song set. And then, of course, by the time it came to, really finalize the record, Bob was like, I've written all these more songs. And he ended up putting on a whole bunch more, another 7 tracks, a lot of lo-fi ones, which made this balloon into being a 19-song record, some of which I just think some of these tracks are just, too slight and get in the way of what are some really, really great songs. Christian Animation Torch Carriers, that's a totally great song, super heavy track. Father Sergeant Christmas Card, some really, really Everywhere with Helicopters, a great song. So just for me, it just gets bogged down in having, again, sort of too many songs. If Bob would have stuck with that 12-song idea and really kept it to a lean 12 songs, I think this would be a classic record and a really great record. And for me, it's compromised at the fact that it just has too many tracks, which is why it comes in at number 16 on my list. The band's most recent record, Mirrored Aztec, coming in at number 15. Similar to Sweating the Plague, I could see this maybe even breaking the top 10 in another couple of years once I've spent some more time with it. Really, really, really strong record. A lot of really great tracks on this. To Keep an Area, the remake of Bunko Men, that's a track that had been on Suitcase before. Math Rock, super fun track. Lip Curlers, Transfusion, Real Grower. So a really, really great listen, and again, I could really see this rising even higher on the list as I get to spend a little more time with it. This cover, love this cover. This was done by a Dayton artist, and I love the fact that Bob kind of went out of his comfort zone and chose to have something on the sleeve that wasn't his own artwork, and I think it's a great choice, kind of a really kind of neo-psychedelic look here that just is fantastic for the LP and just looks great on the sleeve, and I like this collage on the inside of a woman in profile with something on her head, which then again sort of really is almost like a mirror image of this more mature woman on the front. So really fantastic record. Again, it's coming in at 15 on the list as of now, but I've been listening to this nonstop since it came out, and I could really see this breaking the top 10 in another 6 months or so. Number 14, a really fantastic record from 2019, Warp and Woof, 24 songs in under 38 minutes, really short tracks. The reason they're so short is because this was originally, all these songs were originally on 4 6-songs EPs. So to get 3 tracks on a side of 7-inch, they had to be short. So that was kind of the mandate for Bob as a songwriter and to the band to really keep these tracks short. And it was funny in the reunion era when records like Let's Go Eat the Factory were put out, they had talked about, because they were kind of lo-fi and the band was going back to the basement, those records were talked about having the same spirit of an Alien Lanes or even a B-1000, and I didn't really hear that, whereas I think this record, with the shortness of the songs, the speed with which they were recorded, actually do really hit that kind of B-1000 early 90s sweet spot, except now Travis Harrison does such a great job producing them in the back of vans and in backstage before shows and stuff, that it was recorded fast, but it's also recorded really good. It does not suffer from maybe that Vampire and Titus kind of lo-fi quality that really got in the way of my enjoyment of some of those songs. Instead, really, really great record, some really great tracks, cohesive scoops. I mean, that is just a new classic. What else we got on here? My Angel, I mean, that's just a garage rock classic. Some really good tracks, really great sequencing. Love this cover, again, sort of the black and yellow. A really, really nice record from the guys, again, 30 years into their existence, so I like that record a lot. Coming in at number 13, we've got Earthquake Glue. This was the second of the second round on Matador, coming out in 2003, 15 songs. A good record. Again, the fact that there's 15 tracks meant Bob is really sort of restraining himself in terms of putting on too many songs. My Kind of Soldier, great track. Has probably if I had to do my top 5 GBV tracks, the Best of Jill Hives would I'm sure be in that top 5. Really just amazing song. A great kind of mid-fi sound for the guys, and so a very nice record. Comes in at 13 on the list. Getting close to closing out the middle section here at number 12, we've got Isolation Drills from TVT Records, 2001. Probably the best the band has ever sounded in terms of wanting that arena rock size sound, trying to really emulate their heroes, The Who. Producer is it Rob Schnapp did a great job capturing the muscle of the band. It's also got some really great songs. Chasing Heather Crazy, one of the best pop songs the band's ever done. Glad Girls. A really solid record, although I find that when the band is trying to be so hard, I think they sort of lose a little bit of that sort of Beatles psychedelic nature, which I actually find really appealing in the band. And so when they're just trying to do nothing but really rock out, I find that that's not my favorite mode of the band. So it's not quite in the top 10, but is a really solid record by the group. Closing out this middle section at number 11, we've got Zeppelin Over China. This is the second double record by the band, 2019, 32 songs. I think this is a really great record. It was tough to choose the top 10, and this almost made it in because I just think this is a really solid record. I know that some folks didn't like this. I can't see why. I've been pretty hard on Bob for putting on albums, just what I feel to be too many songs. I don't think this suffers at all. Out of 32 tracks, there's like 2 that maybe aren't, amazing, or that feel like that if they were left off, the record would suffer. So this is just, I got some really great songs. My Future in Barcelona. What else do we got here? You Own the Night. So just a really great track. Step of the Wave. Super solid record. Again, a double record, and yet does not suffer at all by having so many tracks on it. Love this cover, and in fact, I love this cover so much. Oh. I own the original Pollard piece that this is based on. It's actually kind of actual size. This frame is 12 inches by 12 inches, and so when they basically took the photo of this, and you see it on the LP version, it is actual size. It's a really great piece. And I wanted this to be framed as much as possible to mimic the cover there. So love this record, love this cover, and that is it from 20 to 11. All right, now let's tackle the top 10 GBB records, their top 10 best records. Coming in at number 10, we have The Bears for Lunch from 2012. This is the third LP they released in a year. This is from the so-called classic lineup reunion, and just a really great record, a really solid record. I know that I was hard on a lot of those LPs for having too many songs. This has 19 tracks, but for me, just the balance is achieved because more of these songs are good than they are bad, and so I just think this really hangs together as a really fine record. What I'd really missed from some of the previous incarnations, the most recent incarnations of the band, was Tobin Sprout. I just loved hearing him again on these records. Skin to Skin Combat, The Corners Are Glowing. Just really great to hear him on a GBB record again. And then Bob had some stellar songs in this period. She Lives in an Airport, just one of my favorite songs. Hangover Child, it's a great track. Some really weird stuff, Finger Gang. Just a really solid record, and again, one of my favorite from the reunion era. Love this cover, really understated for a Bob collage. Super effective, not too many elements, but again, just a really great package, and it was great to have the band back. Coming in at number 9, we've got Half Smiles, The Decomposed from 2004. This was for a long time was going to be the final record for the band. They had recorded it. Bob was getting tired of being saddled with the name and the expectations that came from recording as Guided by Voices, and so he thought, you know what? I'm done with this, and he basically retired the name, said that this was going to be it, held a farewell tour, and for a while it was it for the band. He went on to do a bunch of solo projects, created a band called Boston Spaceships, probably my favorite of his various side projects. Super great record, put out some great records. And so this was going to be it for GBV, and if it was, it would have been a totally fitting epitaph. It's a super solid record. The somber nature of the album is reflected even in this packaging. It's got this collage with this sort of burnt aspect. Bob was feeling burnt out by the band. Got a photo of a sunset, things really kind of coming to a close. Got some great songs on it. Huffman Prairie Flying Field, the closing track. Super great song. tour guide at the Winston Churchill Memorial. Everybody Thinks I'm a Rain Cloud. Great tracks, but also some sort of quieter songs that have acoustic guitar in them, which is pretty rare for a GBV track. You got Window of My World, Girls of Wild Strawberries. So a really solid record. I go to this record a lot, and totally deserves to be in the top 10. Coming in at number 8, we've got Space Gun. This is the only record the band put out in 2018. It comes in at a lean 15 songs. And the fact that they really restricted themselves to one record in a year and put on a comparatively, brief 15 tracks, I think goes a long way towards making this one of my favorite records. A super solid listen all the way through. It's got a great Pollard sleeve on the front. He hadn't actually had a collage on a record for a while, seeing that the previous 2 records had photographs of band members on them, first Mark Shue and then him. So it was great to see a Pollard collage on an LP for the first time in a couple of years. The opening track, Space Gun, if I did my top 5 GBV tracks, that would be in that list. I think I can't say enough about that track. Great video too, by the way. Stretches out to 4 minutes, maybe even approaching 5 minutes. When Bob has so many short songs, I think he really misses the opportunity and the chance to stretch out instrumentally. And with the group of guys that he's got as the new classic lineup, it's just a real joy to hear them again sort of stretch out on a longer track and have a few different sort of parts to a song, and that really goes a long way towards selling that track in my eyes. Some really good other singles. That's Good, fantastic song. See My Field. Sport Component National, that second part of that song is just so anthemic. It's just great. I Love Kangaroos, again, so that more whimsical side of Bob. So a super solid record, and the fact that this band, so far into their career, is releasing such strong records goes a long way towards why I love this band. This is not a band where you only want to hear the hits, where you only care about a certain era of the group. These guys are, not only have they made great records in the past, not only have they made great records a couple of years ago, they're doing it today. I mean, their last record, Mirrored Aztec, was fantastic, and again, it's a long way towards why I like this band so much. Another reason why I like this band so much is there's so many great things to discover in their discography. This is Same Place the Fly Got Smashed from 1990. This was the last of the self-released records and my favorite of that original 4 records. The funny thing about this is I really only listened to this when I started doing the podcast and then doing further research for the book. This is not a record I'd given much of a chance to. This came out in the box set in 1995, I guess. And what I wanted to hear was, I thought, oh great, I've got 4 B1000s. This is a group that I loved. And then I got the box set, and because they didn't really sound like what I really liked about the band or what I was expecting from the band, I did not give these early LPs much of a chance. And it wasn't until, again, just a couple of years ago, I went back and listened to some of these early records that I was just blown away. And this is my favorite of that set. I think what I like about this too, and I think what gives this a unique quality, is that Bob had kind of given up making the band kind of a household name, with like Sandbox. He was going for a very slick look, wanted it to be, like a record you might see in a record store put out by a major label. At this point, he doesn't give a fuck. He's making this look just how he wants it to look, and so it's got a totally different aesthetic, totally different sound. It's much more ragged, and some of these songs just great. Starboy, Club Mollusca, again, just a great vocal performance. Blatant Doom Trip, How Loft I Am, but it's also ambitious stuff. It's a song cycle. It's a concept record, and it's the band in one of the last phases where they're truly not self-conscious because they don't have an audience. Bob's doing it just for himself and for his friends, and I think the results speak for themselves, which is why this is in my top 10. Coming at number 6, we have Do the Collapse from 1999 on TBT Records. Kind of a much maligned record. Speaking of the band's sort of lo-fi era, a lot of fans love that, and a lot of fans really rebelled when they had a much more slick or produced sound. And this is actually too, what's sort of strange about this record is people think of this as being either their major label debut. TBT was not a major label. In fact, Matador was arguably bigger, had more marketing muscle, to be sure, than TBT did, and that because they had gone to a bigger label, that they made a slick record when Again, this was made while they were at Matador. Matador okayed the use of Rick Ocasek to produce the record, and so it's not like they jumped ship from an indie, went to a major, and then made a slick record. They actually had this in mind all along to make this record when they were at Matador. I know a lot of people don't like this cover. It's certainly not a Bob collage, but I think it's again really understated, really classy in a way that and does not sort of belie its origins. I mean, this is a record from 1999, and yet it looks, super classic, very classic font there. I think that photo is a nice sort of visual metaphor or pun of the title of Collapse, and so I think it's a great sleeve. I think it's a really great record. Teenage FBI. I got a kick out of hearing Bob sound so good. I don't think Bob's voice has ever sounded as good as it does on this record. He has just recorded so well, and it's just a real treat to hear these songs have the power and the punch that they do. I know that some folks even prefer the other version of Teenage FBI, which is on the best of, which is more of just a stripped down rock version, and to me they just don't compare. The Teenage FBI that is on this record is just fantastic. It's a 10. Again, if I want to talk about my top 5 GBV tracks, that would probably be in it. Really great record. I know that there's also a lot of controversy behind the song Hold On Hope, which I just don't get. People think that it's this slick radio ballad, but who cares? It's a great song. And as I've said before, there have been times in my life where I was, down or depressed, and that song has meant a great deal to me. And I don't care if it's, somewhat sappy or a ballad. It is a great track. It's a great record, and that's why it comes in at number 6 on my list. Christening the top 5, we've got Class, Clown, Spots a UFO, the second of the reunion of the so-called classic lineup, and my favorite of that era. I just love this record. It's a super strong record. It was great to have Bob and the guys back, and this is where I think they hit upon the chemistry that they had before, which is why I'm not a fan of Let's Go Eat the Factory, but I am a fan of this. Also, they went into a studio, so these songs just sound better. Love this cover, super striking. You got a Bob collage there, but with that black background, it's just a really great package here. And the title track, Class, Clown, Spots a UFO, that had been around for a long time, since sort of pre-Propeller, because that's part of a song suite that he did that ended up on Propeller. And what I love about that, it's got that sort of that psychedelic quality that, again, I think they missed when they were trying so hard to be the Who and just, trying to sound big all the time. There's a real beauty that they can have when they sound not small, but weird or just in a different way, hitting a few other sounds than, again, just trying to be, a rock band all the time. Be Impeccable, it's a great ballad. Keep It in Motion, Chain to the Moon, gorgeous song. Billy Wire, 2 minutes and yet is a ferocious track. So just a really great record. Totally comes into my top 5, and again is my favorite of the reunion albums. Coming at number 4, we've got August by Cake, the first record by what I've called the new classic lineup. The band's first double album, 32 tracks. And again, I've said that I think that Bob puts too many songs on records and releases too many records, and yet this doesn't suffer at all by having 32 tracks. It is a super, super solid collection. One of the things that really makes this a great album is the fact that all 4 band members, 5 if you can include Pollard, but all 4 of the musicians, rather, contribute tracks, about 2 tracks per. And the tracks that the guys did are fantastic. You got Mark Shue here on the cover. It's kind of a cool cover. His tracks are great. Doug Gillard, we knew that Doug Gillard was a great songwriter because he's contributed I'm a Tree and had a couple of his own bands. Bobby Bear Jr., obviously, had been a solo artist for years, and in fact, I saw him on tour with GBV, and that's how he hooked up with Bob and the boys. So, obviously you know that he is a great songwriter. For me, the real revelation here was Kevin March, the drummer. His 2 songs in this, Sentimental Wars and Overloaded, are, again, my favorite tracks from this record, and might even, certainly would crack my top 10 all-time GBV tracks, but, might even be in the top 5. I mean, Overloaded is just such a good song. So that was a real a surprise for me, and I think a lot of folks, just how good he is, with a great voice and songwriter. And so I just think this is a great record. 5 Degrees on the Inside, fantastic opening track. West Coast Company Man, Warm Up to Religion, It's Food, Substitute 11, just great stuff. The Possible Edge, super solid package. Interesting because it does have some mid-fi, hi-fi tracks, but also some lo-fi stuff. But again, totally all fits together and a great package. I think it's a cool cover. I don't like this font, and I think that's a little silly, but I think it's a fun photo. On the inside, you get some more sort of regular, Bob collages. So again, a great track, and again, the fact that so many years into their career, they're producing these gems is why I like this band so much. Coming in at number 3, Under the Bushes, Under the Stars from 1996. This was the second record the band released in Matador. And like I said before, I think all of those Matador records are flawed or compromised in some way. Alien Lanes just has too many songs and was recorded poorly. Mag Earwig has that weird mishmash of Cobra Verde songs and kind of lo-fi songs. And this suffers from kind of the same thing, which was the idea for the record was they were going to go record with Kim Deal down in Memphis, and pretty soon after starting the sessions, Bob walked out. He sort of claimed he had to be back in Dayton for his son's sporting event, and left the sessions, and they never really went back or completed those songs, or never really completed the whole session. And so it's kind of a mishmash of some of the Kim Deal stuff, some of the home recorded stuff, and then some of the stuff he had just done in various Dayton studios. And I think the record really suffers. And in fact, I think some of the songs on here are so good. Official Ironman Rally song, Don't Stop Now. Some of the best songs Bob had ever done. And I think that if they would have stuck with Kim Deal and made that full record, I think this would be, or whatever would have come out of those sessions, would have been the best record GBV had ever done. I think that his songwriting at the time was so amazing. I think Kim Deal's just got a great sensibility, and I think that combination would have just been like getting David Bowie together with Iggy Pop. I think it just would have been the perfect combination. It would have just been a record for the ages. And instead, what you get is still very, very good. Again, this comes in at number 3 on my list, and for many folks is a real favorite, deservedly so. But it is flawed by having way too many songs, and then it's got like 24 tracks, but then the last 6, if it's on a CD, are kind of considered bonus songs. On vinyl, it's got a 6-song EP. So it's kind of a flaw. It's kind of a compromise. Again, it's a great one because it's still a very good record, but it's kind of tough because it does have some of the best songs in the band's career, and yet it's got a whole lot of other filler on it as well. Again, Tobin Sprout, To Remake the Young Flyer, probably my all-time favorite Tobin Sprout track. Just a great neo-psychedelic song. Don't love this cover too much. I think this element's just kind of like stuck on there. But again, a super solid record. All right, we're getting down to it. You probably figure what's coming next. Number 2, we have Propeller from 1992. Although I must say, so this is the most recent Scat issue on CD, but where I first heard Propeller was on this. So this is the first GBV record I bought. It was 1993, and this record was the lead review on Alternative Press magazine. And I was into Pavement and Sebadoh at the time, and they probably mentioned lo-fi, so I was like, oh cool, let's go out and get this. So I went home and listened to this record, and as I said before, it was a bit too lo-fi. I couldn't quite hear the songs amidst the tape hiss or the sort of ragged playing. And so it really didn't hook me. But then I was like, wait a second, there's like a whole other record on here. So I went and I fast forwarded to song number 19 and listened to Over the Neptune, Meshgear Fox, and was just blown away. To this day, that is my favorite Guided by Voices track. And I think Propeller is just a fantastic, fantastic record. It's almost heartbreaking that was going to be the end of GBV. He broke up the band after making 500 copies. The band did their own covers, gave them to some friends, and then that was going to be it until Robert Griffin heard the record, called him up, and persuaded him to not really get the band back together, because when the time they made this, it was really just him and his brother with Tobin helping out. But get the name, sort of resurrect the name, and start releasing again as Guided by Voices. And so the result was Vampire and Titus. But what hooked me to the band was Propeller. And every time I would play this for years, because I did not have that Scat reissue until, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I would put this in the CD player and instantly advance to number 19 and then play Propeller. Weed King, Quality of Armor, Unleashed the Large-Hearted Boy, 14 Cheerleader Cold Front, On the Tundra. Just really, really great songs, hitting that sweet spot between 4-track, but also a mixture with some, I think even 24-track over Neptune, Meshgear Fox. Really, really great collection of songs, and again, just a really, really solid record, and again, one of my favorites, and is almost a close tie for being my favorite record by the band. All right, you know what's coming next? B-1000. This is not only the band's greatest record, it's one of the best record of the 90s, and just a stellar, stellar, stellar collection of songs, you know, great package. The band was, well, you know, you want to say the band was on fire, but I think that, you know, a lot of the stuff was already sitting around, and I think the secret sauce here was the sequencing. And you cannot underestimate the role that Robert Griffin from Scat Records played in the GBV story and in the creation of this as an album. You know, there's a reason why this, for me, is number one. And it's the sequencing, it's the way that the tracks segue, and it's the song selection. And the reason for that, largely, is because of Robert Griffin. Robert Griffin pushed back to Pollard, and, you know, this record went through, I think, 5 different versions, where, you know, Pollard kept tinkering with the song list, taking songs out, putting new songs in, and Griffin, you know, seeing great tracks be taken off the lineup, said, wait a second, you know, I gotta sort of step in here, and made his suggestions to Pollard to include some of the tracks that he had been leaving off of some of these final versions. And so I think that, you know, you cannot underestimate the brilliant touches that Robert Griffin brought to this. And, you know, as a fan, makes me wish that Bob did that more. You know, this is the only record that he really collaborated with someone, and it's the best record he ever made. So I think what that says to me is that he could use, again, not, well, you know, people say he needs an editor, and I think the role that Robert Griffin played to him was sort of Maxwell Perkins to Bob's Fitzgerald. You know, really sort of being a sounding board and being another set of eyes and ears, and saying, you know what, let's work together on this, and I think we can make the record even better than it is, and the results speak for themselves. This is a record for the ages. I'm going to look at some of these songs, man. Buzzards and Dreadful Crows, Tractor Red Chain, Gold Heart, Mountaintop Queen Directory, Hot Freaks, Smothered in Hugs, Yours to Keep, Echo Smart. I mean, this whole, that's the first side. That whole side is absolute brilliant. It's genius. Gold Star for Robot Boy, Awful Bliss. I mean, there's not a bad song on here. I mean, you know, even a kind of weird song like Her Psychology Today or something, or Demons Are Real, it fits. And again, they're sort of melded into the track list, and it's sequenced in such a way, and it's crossfaded, that this is just, it's a great listen. I think it's the pinnacle of the band's career. And it's just it's a record that I can listen to, you know, every day for the past 20 years, and I almost have. So this is my number one Guided by Voices record. I would love to hear what yours are. Leave your top 30 list, your top 10, whatever you want to do in the comments. Thank you for listening.